So, Jake Berry, could you please talk a bit about your background, what brought you into politics?
Yeah, so I was born and brought up in the northwest, in Liverpool actually. Lived just outside the city centre, went to school in Liverpool and then went to University of Sheffield and studied law. And apart from training to be a lawyer, which I did in the City of London, I have always worked in the northwest, and actually once I trained in the City of London I worked out that people who say you need to be at your desk at 3 o'clock in the morning to prove something, it does prove something, it proves that you're a complete fool. And that's why I was happy to come back to the northwest and work here in the legal industry, and also have other things I did. I run a small business with a friend of mine. And then in about 2005 I really started becoming engaged in politics, and there was a few things that drove me into that. But one of the things actually was working in Manchester. You know, I'd come into my office every Monday morning, and there'd be the unmentionables, the chip papers, and all the other things that people do in office entrances when they're out and, you know, on Canal Street in Manchester and they're walking home. And I really got frustrated. I thought, you know, actually this looks so bad. It says something about us, and it says it about Manchester and about our business. So I stood for council in Manchester. I had actually stood once before when I was living in Liverpool the year before, and really decided not to be one of those people who sit on the well-worn path at the sideline whinging about things and not doing it. To be one of those people who actually says, we can make things better, and if no one else is going to do it, I'm going to be the person who does it. And from that I became more involved with the Conservative Party and decided really that I wanted to be part of the change. I was really unhappy with how the country was going at that time, to the huge economic crash caused in part by, you know, the Labour Party. And I decided, you know, I want to be part of the change and change the country for the better. And I was selected to be the candidate for Rossendale and Darwen on the 13th of January 2007.
Was that a special day?
It was a really special day. You know, it's a huge pleasure and achievement, and moved here straight away. I've lived here for over 8 years, I think it is now. And in 2010 I was elected to Parliament to represent the area I live, and the area I really love to live with my wife, and I live in Helmshire, and it's just a fantastic place to live, really. And I suppose the reason, you know, sometimes people would tell you, why did you choose the Conservative Party? I don't think that any political party has all the right ideas. I'm a Conservative MP, and I think the Conservative Party gets things wrong. But I suppose when you look at political parties, and as people are maybe thinking of voting for the first time, you have to look at, one, what they have done, the evidence of what they've done, and also, does that party share the majority of my values? And you'll never get to a point where you agree with every single thing a political party does. But for the Conservative Party, for me, coming from a business background, its ambition, its desire to support people and aspiration and work hard and want to get on, was an ambition and a desire I shared. And that's why I joined the Conservative Party and now a Conservative MP.
Could you talk us through a day in the life of an MP? So what's the balance between home and London?
So I tend to go to London either on Monday mornings if I get a train down, or sometimes on Sunday nights, and I spend 3 days a week in Parliament, so that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They're days we vote on, and I go down and take part in the debates, vote on laws.
Is your attendance good?
Yeah, no, I'm above average. I'm above average, which is where I like to be. And I have a little bit of a rule of thumb, is that I try and take part in the debate or ask a question or play an active role in Parliament every single week I'm down there. Because I'm sent there to work on behalf of the people of Rossendale and Darwen, and so I go down and work. There are debates on Thursdays, and I do sometimes stay down for them if they're debates which are important to the area I live in and the area I represent. But more often than not, they're not votable, so I'll come home on Thursday or Wednesday night actually, and I've got an office in Darwen, an office in Rossendale, and that's where I work from the other 2 days of the week, although I do work on Saturday and sometimes on Sunday as well. And really, that work here locally is what gets me, it is, because what gets me up in the morning. So I do 8 advice surgeries a month, and then I do street surgeries on top of that. It's like your MP to you. The people aren't always pleased to see me, but I go and find them. And that ability to help people, sometimes with the worst things in life. People have been to see me, have been victims of sexual abuse. People have been to see me with great news that their son, daughter, brother, sister has just gone to university. And everything in between, the things which are the worst and best of life, are the things which really get me up in the morning. When the alarm clock goes off for the second time, and you hit the snooze button and you think, I do have to get up. What gets me up is that part of the job which is just working hard for everyone here locally and improving their lives.
Interact with the local people.
Yeah.
I'm right in saying you have a background in housing and development. Is there anything that you've done in your 4 or 5 years in office, or that you plan to do, to ensure affordable housing and to combat homelessness?
When I went into government in 2010, the first thing I did was go and work in housing, and I still advised the Prime Minister on his policy board on housing law and housing changes. And we've done, it's a little known fact that in the last 5 years we have built more council houses in this country than the Labour government did in 13 years.
Are they affordable for normal work?
Well, council houses by definition, by that I mean affordable homes. Yes. Everyone still calls them council houses, but they're owned by housing associations. And I think that's still not enough, by the way.
Yeah.
There's still a demand hugely outstrips supply, but if you look at including private investment, the £16 billion that's been invested in affordable housing, it's money well spent. Because one of the most important things for people is having a home. But it's not all just about affordable housing. It's about enabling people to work towards owning their own home. And there's 2 things which we've done, which I've been personally involved in, which I think have really made a difference. The first is that we've launched a longer term private renting tenancy called the Family Friendly Tenancy, the FFT. And that envisages that the British housing journey has changed, and people will spend longer time renting houses now than they would have done historically. The average age of buying a house is now, first home is now in the 30s, which is far too high. But so that gives longer term protection for people who want to rent in the private rented sector. The other thing we've done is the Help to Buy scheme as well, which enables people who have a secure job to get on the housing ladder just with a 5% deposit, as long as they can afford the mortgage. And the key thing, they have to be able to afford the mortgage. And I can remember people coming and seeing me here locally and saying, well, I'm a teacher and my husband is in the police force or runs his own small business or works in a factory in Rossendale. We've got secure jobs, but because we don't have rich parents, the bank of mum and dad, we can't scrape together a 10% deposit. That is completely wrong. And that Help to Buy scheme, which enables people to buy with a lower deposit, is a real enabler to get people into buying their first property. And there are literally hundreds of families across Rossendale and Darwen who have bought their first home because of that Help to Buy scheme. If you remember, before the last election, there was talk of nationalising the banks. I like to think that scheme has nationalised the bank of mum and dad. So it's not just people who have wealthy parents now who can buy their home, and that's absolutely right. And specifically on the issue of homelessness, we should have a zero tolerance approach on homelessness, and this government has a zero tolerance approach on homelessness.
Wait, did you see recently is Manchester Selfridges with the homeless spikes outside?
No.
What's your view on? There's a big campaign underway to remove them, but what's your views on companies doing that, setting up homeless spikes outside their premises to stop people sleeping rough?
Well, rough sleepers will always be with us. There are actually some people that I've worked with. Charities, to go out and talk to homeless people, like St Oswald's in London, and there are people who, whatever you do, will still be on the streets. People who you get into temporary accommodation who leave almost straight away, and in fact, it's always been with us. If you read Chaucer's Canterbury's Tales, there's the descriptions of homeless people there. But we should have a zero tolerance approach. There is no reason why anyone should spend 2 nights out.
Yeah.
And the government's really pushed this No Second Night Out campaign, which is the idea that if we see a homeless person on the street, we, the public, not the government, we should all take responsibility for reporting that to the No Second Night Out helpline, and then someone will come along and help that person and get them off the streets. So, building more houses, sure, enabling people to own their own home, absolutely, giving people security in the private rented sector, all of those are things which we've done, but also we've got to focus down on this homelessness because, in a modern society, here in Britain, one of the wealthiest countries, one of the top 10 wealthiest countries in the world, there is no excuse for people living on the streets, and we've got to stand behind.
Okay. And I've got to ask before we move on, doing a bit of research, I read that you have registered interest with a legal firm, Squire Patton Boggs.
Correct.
Could you discuss your relationship with them, and does that affect your work in any way?
I actually think it helps my work as an MP. So I as I said, I've worked as a lawyer for 10 years. I've been involved in running businesses, and in fact, as a lawyer, you have to do a certain amount of work every year to keep your practicing licence on, which I do with Squire, Patton Boggs, and I'm grateful that they enable me to do that and keep all my training up to date. It gives me a huge advantage as your MP and anyone else's MP, because I use all of that legal skills and expertise to help people. Yeah. And in fact, only yesterday I was visiting someone who had a pure sort of property law question. I said, no, I'm not going to get in the realms of giving you legal advice because you may sue me if I get it wrong. But having that understanding of the law and that ability to read paperwork quickly, drill down to the really important issues to people is a huge advantage, and that's what I believe actually one of the most important roles really for someone as an MP is to have had some real world experience, worked out there within the public sector or a private business to ensure that you can bring those real life skills to support people. When people come and see me in my advice surgery, you don't immediately contact your MP because you've got a problem. You speak to your counsellor, you speak to your friends, you speak to the Citizens Advice Bureau. When they come and knock on my door and come and see me, I am often their last home, the last person they will come and see. And having that skill set to sit down and say, look, I know how we can fix this, and by the way, I'm really motivated by helping you, I think is a huge advantage.
Is that going to influence your views on the NHS at all? Or is it completely separate?
My views on the NHS are really clear. I don't have private healthcare. I actually think anyone who buys it is it's a free country, they can do, but I think they're pretty stupid really, because if I get run over walking across the road here today, then there's no Bupa or whoever else accident and emergency service. We all need the NHS, we all rely on the NHS, it's what I use, it's what every member of my family uses. And so I'm really proud to be part of a government that has increased the funding for the NHS every single year in this Parliament and has made a commitment to continue to do that. And you know, the reason I care about the NHS is because I need it, you need it, we all need it to be there for us, and I think we're making real progress with that.
Okay. Talking locally for Rossendale and Darwen, at the election, what is the difference between Conservatives and Labour on a local level?
Do you know what, I think this is people always say, the next election is a really important election, and they normally say that because they're involved in it. It's like, no, if you're going to elect me or not elect me, it's a really important election. But I believe actually, almost for the first time in years, this is the country really stood at a crossroads, and there's a big difference between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. I have my plan for Rossendale, which I'm talking to people about, showing that if we stick together, if we continue down the road, even though there's been some difficult decisions, you just have to walk around the centre of Darwen and the centre of Rossendale to see that things are getting better. We've got a clear plan to make sure that the area we live keeps improving, that young people can get a job, that people can get apprenticeships. And sticking that course, I think, is really, really clear. The alternative, which is the difference between the two parties, you have a Labour Party who haven't learned any of the lessons of the financial crash in 2010. They want to spend more, they want to borrow more, they want to put all of the hard-won progress at risk. And also it's very unsure, because they've said they'll go into coalition with the Scottish National Party, maybe with Sinn Féin, and that would just lead to chaos. So you've got a really big choice at this election. You stick with the people who have a clear plan, or look at the chaos and uncertainty of a Labour Party or a Labour Party supported by anyone else. And I think we've demonstrated real progress here, and I think that people will and should back that in the election.
If you are re-elected, what would you do to help young people, for example, transport costs, bus fares? During my time, the 7 years I spent at BLGS, the bus fares doubled, it meant towards the end of my time there that we were getting lifts because they were cheaper than paying for the bus fare. So
look, it's not something I actually control, it's not controlled by government. The government gives a statutory obligation on local authorities to provide transport. But no, I completely agree with you. I think that it's actually a disgrace the way young people have been treated with bus fares. So you may have had the Labour County Council, which has increased bus fares for young people. It's a real barrier to getting to school, and at the moment they're consulting on doubling the bus fare if you want to go to faith school. There's always been a bit of a deal. If you want to go to All Saints in Rossendale, because the Roman Catholic school recruits from a much larger area, because there are far fewer Roman Catholic secondary schools than there are, for example, Church of England secondary schools. There's always been an understanding, although it isn't a statutory obligation on the local authority to provide that transport at a reasonable cost, then they would. Like all these unwritten rules, you occasionally have people who come and rip up the rule book and break that bond of trust, and I think that that's happened. And I think it's completely wrong. If I was going to send my children to school, if I had children, I was going to send, I hope I will one day, but if I was going to send them to school, I'd choose them to go to faith school. So I understand why people make that choice. And politics is ultimately about choices. So I look at spending £20 million on Preston bus station in the centre of Preston, which is supposedly the most attractive piece of brutalist architecture of its kind in the country. I personally think it looks like a complete dump.
Okay.
But I think that's the wrong decision. Should we be spending £20 million protecting a concrete monstrosity because English Heritage think it should be a listed building? Probably not. Maybe we could spend £10 million to do it, but let's actually put that money, which has been taken directly out of the transport budget, back into school transport. So people who are trying to, go to school, get qualifications, take those first steps in life, can achieve that. And that is just completely the wrong priority.
Yeah.
And people get the choice at elections. It's not the county council election this year, but people get a choice at election to say, has my local authority had the right priority for me? Do I want a £20 million concrete bus station restored in Preston, or do I want to be able to get to BRGS?
So are you saying that if a Conservative, if it was a Conservative council, their bus prices would be lower?
No, I can't say that. It was part of the time you were at school, it probably was a Conservative council, but...
would you push to make
absolutely. Well, at the moment on this, I do push. At the moment on this faith school transport, I am holding the feet of the local authorities to the flames, saying this is completely the wrong priority. If you look at another recent proposal, they wanted to cancel all the funding for, I call them lollipop ladies, but I think they're called crossing patrol managers or something now. They wanted to cancel all of that funding, and again, it's just the wrong priority. And you have I think Preston's too remote from Rossendale. I think Rossendale is often forgotten about as the sort of outpost of Lancashire County Council. We are the most south-eastern part of the council, a very long way away from Preston. And, I think too often we're in the blind spot of Lancashire County Council. And it's exactly the same with Blackburn, with Darwen, who are following these similar proposals. And with them, I'd say, they spend £100,000 a year paying someone from a trade union to work in the local authority, not do any work for you and me as the taxpayer in the local authority, just to promote trade unions. I've got no problem with that. I'm a big supporter of trade unions, but that sort of work should be paid for by their members out of their subs, not by council taxpayers who think they're paying for local services.
Talk about council budgets and all these things. It all comes back to the climate of austerity that we find ourselves in at the moment. First of all, is it necessary for the cuts to be happening, and also is it the responsibility of ordinary people to pay for the mistakes made by the wealthiest in society?
Well, the thing is with austerity, it's not a matter of choice. In 2010...
But yet you see the Greek elections and the...
Yeah, well, hey, look, move to Greece by all means, but, I would not go down the same route as Greece. If you look at people working in the public sector in Greece, they've had a 25% pay cut. In this country, we've said to people, look, let's have reasonable austerity and we will limit your pay rise, not a cut, pay rise to 1%. In Greece, they've slashed people's pensions. Now, pensioners in the UK are £800 a year better off than were in 2010. Look, you may, by all means, move to Greece. It's not somewhere I would want to live because I think they've already gone down the wrong track, and I think what they're doing now with the instability in their country, they're going further down the wrong road. But we were in a similar position to Greece. So that 25% pay cut for everyone in the public sector, that slashing people's pensions, could have been the decision we've taken in this country if we hadn't decided to live within our means of being public spending under control. And actually, for every young person out there, it's not your debt. It's the debt built up by the generation ahead of you. But every single person, including me and every single person watching this video, now starts off with £30,000 or £40,000 worth of debt gifted to them by the people who own all these houses, which have gone up 10 times in value. And I don't think that's fair. I actually think people working now owe a moral obligation to generations to come to ensure that we live within our means. And of all of these difficult decisions that we've made, we're not even talking about paying back a penny. What we're talking about is saying is we will live within our means. our generation, when they start working, won't spend the money of the next generation by borrowing it. I think that's a pretty low bar, actually. Most people who run a household budget say every month, we've got to live within our means. And so, talk about austerity and, and things like that. The big problem we have is that for every £4 the government was spending in 2010, we were borrowing £1. And that is unsustainable. If you earn £100 a week, but you spend £120 every week, you are getting poorer every single week, and it's unsustainable. And that's why it was a necessary decision to make cuts, spending cuts, to live within our means. It was absolutely necessary. There was no alternative.
That leads fairly nicely onto the fact that inequality is a big problem now. We have 85 people holding as much wealth as half the world's population. Do you think that's a reasonable price to pay for the poorest getting squeezed?
We spoke about this earlier. I don't think I recognise that statistic, because if you earn the minimum wage in the UK, you're one of the top 10% of wage earners in the world.
It's still not luxurious, though, is it? Minimum wage?
No, I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying you have to acknowledge through that actually if you're a minimum wage earner, not wealthy by any measure, not one of these top earners, you are still one of the top 10% of the world, and that's a reflection of the fact that we are, a very wealthy country, one of the top 10 wealthiest countries in the world. But this government, I think, has done huge work to try and narrow that inequality, and how we have done it is by not taxing people who are on low wage. So when you...
And tax cuts for the top.
Yeah, but you have to look at on the basis of evidence. So when you look back in 2010, you could earn £6,400 before you started paying tax. That meant loads of people working full time on the minimum wage were paying tax to the government, for the government to use to pay for things like family tax credit for some of the wealthiest, people earning over 50, 60, 70,000 pounds. And it's not reasonable to say to someone, you go out and earn £10,000 a year working in a factory in Rossendale to pay, family tax credit to someone who's earning 50 or 60,000 pounds working in London. It's just not reasonable. So we've done a few things. So we've put that up from just over £6,000 to next year it'll be 10,500, taking over a million people out paying tax altogether. We've taken away some benefits from the wealthiest. We've taken away family tax credit, what we used to call a family allowance for people. And, believe you me, I got lots of emails and letters complaining about it. And my view is, well, if you're earning 50 or 60,000, you don't need it. You may want it, but you don't need it. So there's been some really difficult decisions. And if you look at the cut in the top rate of tax, what we'll just say is it has to be based on evidence. When the tax rate was 50p, people found so many ways to avoid paying it that the government took in no extra tax. At 45p, we've brought in 5 times more tax revenue than we did at 50p. And guess what, by the way, for a Labour Party who says, this was the wrong thing to do, the top rate of tax has been higher in every single year of this Parliament with a Conservative-led coalition than it was in any of the years, 13 of them, of the Labour government. Judge people not by what they say, but by what they do. You had a Labour Party which abolished the 10p tax rate, doubling the tax on the lowest earners, and had a top rate of tax at 40%. You've got a Conservative Party which has taken those lowest earners out of tax altogether, and a higher tax rate for every single top earner in this country than at any point under the Labour Party government.
So can we talk about fracking, which is a fairly local issue, happening near Preston, isn't it, in Lancashire?
Yeah.
Are there environmental concerns and very real dangers worth the economic benefit? So
people who contact me about fracking really fall into 2 camps. There are a group of people who just do not, whether it's safe or not, they don't want to see the government exploit or use or us to have access to any fossil fuel. They want to move entirely to renewables. So it's a point of view I have some sympathy with. It's not one I agree, because I still put petrol in my car and still turn my gas central heating on when I'm cold, so I don't think we're quite there yet. That's the first group of people who are just opposed to it at whatever price. And the second group of people who I would associate myself with are people who think actually gas, non-conventional gas, can be part of the energy mix we need in this country, together with renewable wind energy, expansion of introducing tidal energy, geothermal and all the other types of energy supply. but I still have concerns about safety. And that's the group I would put myself with, and it's why I actually didn't vote or support the recent legislation which went through Parliament in favour of fracking. I didn't vote for it, I didn't vote against it, I abstained on it because my conversation with the government was, until you satisfy around all of these safety concerns, it's not something I feel I can support. However, if you look at the difference between the fracking industry in the United States and the proposed use of the fracking industry here in Britain, in the United States they have virtually no regulation of things like farmers driving boreholes down, of the industry in general. I think that's been the cause of lots of these videos we've seen on the internet where you turn the tap on and a flame of gas comes out, which may save on your heating bills, but it's not something that any of us want to see in our own home. And then contrast that to how it would work in Britain.
Yeah.
We can be really proud in this country that we have the health and safety executive who are extremely robust, have far-reaching statutory powers to ensure that things we do in this country are done safely. And people often say to me, oh, you know, it's all health and safety, and you know, I think people do sometimes use it as a badge to put on things they just don't want to do or can't be bothered doing. But I think Britain can be really proud that that Olympic stadium we built in London is the first Olympic park or stadium ever in the history of the Olympics to be built without the loss of life, without the loss of a contractor's life. So the health and safety executive do fantastic work. And the fracking industry or the non-conventional gas industry here in the UK will be governed by them. They are not shy about enforcing people's obligations to make sure we remain safe. But from my own personal point of view, even with all of those additional protections, I think it's quite important that we satisfy all of the safety concerns that people have before we start drilling for it here in Lancashire, which, as I say, is why I didn't support it.
Okay. And on the environment front, quickly, obviously fracking, even if it goes ahead, it's a relatively short-term solution, isn't it? Ultimately, we're going to need renewables. Would you be pushing for investments into research on wind farms, solar panels at the moment?
I think the thing with energy, well, everything is relatively short-term when you look at hydrocarbons. But with the fracking or non-conventional gas industry, you have about the same amount of reserve, if not more, than we had in the North Sea. And that sort of temporary 40-year lifespan, maybe 50 or 60-year lifespan with non-conventional gas, shouldn't stop us using it. Because actually, reducing our energy costs stops us exporting jobs. For example, in the pottery industry in Stoke-on-Trent, the fabric textile industry here in East Lancashire, or even the furniture making industry, stops us exporting jobs to Eastern Europe or the Far East, where workers have far less protection, where things aren't done with environmental concerns, and where our robust health and safety laws wouldn't apply. So it helps us keep our industry onshore, keeping all those jobs here in Britain, and actually will help us bring industries back from around the world to Lancashire, where people can work in them, and as I say, they'll be properly regulated. So 50 or 60 years, as you say, isn't forever, but it's a long enough period that we should embrace it, in my view. But do renewables have a part to play? Yeah, absolutely. But it has to be an energy mix. I think that nuclear power has its part to play. I think that hydrocarbons or fossil fuels have their part to play. I think things like wind energy, as I say, geothermal, and some of the very exciting work we're seeing around tidal gateways. There was one proposed in the River Loon, just up in North Lancashire, do have a real part to play in providing our energy mix. I'm not 100% sure that we need any more wind turbines to be put on the hills around here in East Lancashire. I'm a great supporter of the offshore wind turbines in Liverpool Bay, which I sometimes see as I drive over to North Wales. But in our rush to green our energy production, it shouldn't also be a rush to reindustrialise and degrade the beautiful environment around Rossendale and Darwen. And I think that every part of the country must be part of the green revolution, and it shouldn't just happen in East Lancashire. It's very exciting, all the jobs that be created. And don't forget, of course, that if non-conventional gas does go ahead in East Lancashire, we're going to have a university in Blackpool where all of those skills and expertise for that industry will be and will remain. If you go anywhere in the world to an oil rig or an oil platform, you will hear lots of people with Scottish accents. And that's because when they started the North Sea oil industry in Scotland, they got the mix right. They decided that they would have all the skills. So if you're exploiting an oil well in Saudi Arabia, you will have an Aberdonian or someone from that area over in Saudi Arabia giving you advice. That's why non-conventional gas is such an exciting opportunity for us, particularly here in East Lancashire, because we can have all those highly skilled, highly paid jobs here. We will get significant government grants, £100,000 per wellhead, to go directly into our economy, and 1% of the revenue of every single non-conventional gas site will be put in a sovereign wealth fund to be invested here in East Lancashire. Now, I'm not suggesting it will be like the Qatari sovereign wealth fund, where you're going to end up owning football clubs or airlines, but actually seeing that huge investment coming in Lancashire's economy is very, very exciting for everyone who's out there, wants to get a job and be part of our society.
Okay. Finally, could you please summarise why people watching this, particularly young people, should give you their vote on the 7th of May?
One of the main things I've been involved with since I became the MP, and it's quite interesting, lots of people say young people don't really vote at elections, and if that's true, I'm a fool.
Well, Russell Brand's very popular with his views. So
yeah, well, but if it's true, I'm not sure I agree with them on lots of things, but if it's true that young people don't vote at elections because MPs don't concentrate on the things that matter to them, then I am really foolish. Because one of the first things I started doing when I became the MP was I saw how high youth unemployment was across Rossendale and Darwen, and I just thought, you know what, this is completely unacceptable. Yeah. So I've done several things about it. First of all, we've run 3 hugely successful apprenticeship campaigns, which have been about getting young people that start in life. In my view, an apprenticeship is the start of a career, it's not a job. And we've seen that 4,500 young people start their apprenticeship just here in East Lancashire. To compare that how that was before 2010, there was fewer than, in fact, just over 2,000 people. So we more than doubled the number of young people going into apprenticeships.
Do those apprenticeships lead into full-time jobs?
Yeah, well, I hope so. I mean, I have an apprentice in my own office, so I don't just talk about it, I do. And she's outside, you can have a chat with her and see whether she's happy in her full-time job. And even often if they don't lead to a full-time job, it's a huge advantage. If you look at BAE Systems here in East Lancashire, they take on more apprentices than there are full-time jobs in BAE Systems at the end of that apprenticeship. But you're walking away from that employer with a world-recognised, world-leading qualification from one of our best-known and most successful manufacturers. The other thing we've done is I've held 2 jobs fairs. They've been really, really exciting because on the day, 300 people, 300, 400 have turned up to each, and 100 people on the day have got a job. And that's why youth unemployment, people under 25 in Rossendale and Darwen, has dropped 68% since its peak. And that's a record, I think, that I as the MP, and actually everyone else who's been involved in those campaigns, can be really proud of. And that's despite actually having terrible economic circumstances, despite the great Labour Party recession. Businesses and the MP, and in all fairness the councillors and people who live in Rossendale and Darwen and have a passion about it, said, do you know what? The fact that the country is being knocked down isn't going to knock down our young people here across Darwen and Rossendale. We're going to back them and we're going to get behind them. And I think that record of going out there, ensuring that young people can get a job, I think is what I'm really proud of. I think everyone who lives locally has been involved in it should be really proud of. And I think it shows that even if young people don't go out and vote, there is an MP here sat in this office fighting for them every single day of the week. And as long as I remain the MP, I will keep on fighting because I know that's hugely important to everyone who lives here.
Jake Berry, thank you.
Thank you very much.